The alley behind Murphy's diner reeked of garbage and broken dreams, rain turning the cracked asphalt into a mirror of neon reflections. Marcus Chen pulled his worn baseball cap lower, the same disguise he'd used for 3 years to escape his real identity as the youngest tech billionaire in Silicon Valley. That's when he saw her, heavily pregnant, soaked to the bone, clutching a soggy cardboard sign that read, "Please help my baby." Sarah's tears mixed with raindrops as she shivered against the brick wall, completely unaware that the man approaching her had enough money to buy the entire city block. But Marcus had learned the hard way that wealth painted targets on everyone you loved. His last girlfriend had died in a car accident that wasn't really an accident. His business partner had vanished after asking too many questions. Now, staring at this vulnerable woman carrying new life, Marcus faced an impossible choice. He could walk away and keep them both safe, or risk everything to save her. What he didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just any homeless woman, and the people hunting him had already found her first. Could one act of kindness trigger a war that would change both their lives forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus's worn sneakers splashed through puddles as he approached slowly, hands visible. 3 years of living in shadows had taught him that sudden movements spooked everyone, both predators and prey. "Hey," he called softly, his voice barely audible over the drumming rain. "You okay?" Sarah's head snapped up, revealing hollow cheeks and eyes that had seen too much. She couldn't be older than 25, but desperation aged people in ways that made counting years meaningless. Her hand instinctively moved to protect her swollen belly. "I'm not looking for trouble," she whispered, pressing herself deeper into the alcove between dumpsters. Marcus stopped 6 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to show he wasn't a threat. "Neither am I. When's the last time you ate something?" The question seemed to surprise her. Sarah's free hand went to her stomach, and Marcus caught the slight wince that crossed her features. "I'm fine." That wasn't what I asked. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, watching her tense. Instead of whatever she'd feared, he pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "There's a diner right here. Let me buy you dinner." "Why?" The word came out sharp, defensive. "What do you want?" It was the right question. Marcus had spent years watching people's motivations, learning to read the angles everyone worked. But standing in this rain-soaked alley, watching a pregnant woman who'd been failed by every system meant to protect her, he felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. Simple human decency. "Nothing," he said, and meant it, just to help. Sarah studied his face in the flickering neon light from Murphy's sign. Whatever she saw there made her shoulders relax fractionally. I don't have anywhere to go after. If you're thinking..." "I'm not thinking anything except that you need food and shelter." Marcus took a careful step closer. No strings, no expectations. Just a meal, and maybe we figure out next steps from there. For a long moment, only rain filled the silence between them. Then Sarah's stomach growled loudly enough for both of them to hear, and she almost smiled. "I guess I am pretty hungry." "Come on, then." Marcus gestured toward the diner's back entrance. "Let's get you somewhere warm." As they walked the 20 feet to Murphy's door, Marcus's trained paranoia kicked in. He scanned the alley's shadows, noted the black sedan that had been parked across the street for too long, catalogued the escape routes he'd memorized during 3 years of calculated invisibility. Living off the grid wasn't just about avoiding recognition, it was about staying alive. But something about Sarah's situation overrode his carefully honed survival instincts. Maybe it was the way she'd instinctively protected her unborn child, or the dignity she maintained even while asking for help. Whatever it was, Marcus found himself making a decision that would have horrified his security team. He was going to help her. Consequences be damned. Inside Murphy's diner, fluorescent lights buzzed over cracked vinyl booths and a counter that had seen better decades. The warmth hit them immediately, and Sarah sagged with relief as Marcus guided her to a corner booth with clear sightlines to both entrances. "Order whatever you want," he said, sliding the plastic menu across the table. "Seriously, whatever sounds good." Sarah's hands shook slightly as she opened the menu. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who wanted something." She looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time. Most people do. Marcus thought about the corporate boardrooms, where every handshake was a transaction, the social circles where friendship came with price tags, the isolation that unlimited wealth had built around his life brick by brick. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Most people do." Neither of them noticed the black sedan pulling into Murphy's parking lot or the man in the passenger seat lifting a camera with a telephoto lens. The penthouse elevator climbed silently through the glass tower, carrying them toward the 42nd floor. Maya pressed herself against the mahogany-paneled wall, her borrowed coat wrapped tightly around her swollen belly. Every muscle in her body screamed with exhaustion, but her mind raced with questions about the stranger who'd rescued her from the alley. Daniel Ashford, the name he'd given her, stood at the opposite corner, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the city lights blur past the elevator's glass walls. In the harsh fluorescent lighting, she could see him more clearly now. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair slightly disheveled from the rain, and eyes that seemed to hold secrets she couldn't begin to imagine. His clothes were expensive but worn with casual indifference, as if money meant nothing to him. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since leaving the hospital. He turned toward her, and something flickered across his features, surprise perhaps or recognition of a pain he understood too well. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" "I'm not looking for charity," she said, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her voice. "Good, I'm not offering any." The elevator chimed softly as they reached his floor. "I'm offering you a choice." The doors opened directly into his apartment, and Maya's breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, offering a panoramic view of the city sprawling below like a constellation of earthbound stars. Modern furniture in muted tones filled the open living area, while abstract paintings added splashes of color to the pristine white walls. "This is—" She stepped forward hesitantly, her worn sneakers silent on the polished hardwood floors. "Lonely," Daniel finished, moving past her toward the kitchen. Most of the time. She watched him pull ingredients from a refrigerator that cost more than she'd made in 6 months at her last job. His movements were efficient, practiced, as if cooking for unexpected guests was routine, but something in his posture suggested otherwise, a careful tension, as if he was always prepared for threats she couldn't see. "Why are you helping me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Daniel paused, a carton of eggs balanced in his hands. For a moment his carefully controlled expression slipped, revealing something raw beneath. "Because everyone deserves a second chance." The weight in his voice made her chest tighten. She settled onto one of the leather bar stools at the kitchen island, grateful to be off her feet. Through the windows she could see other towers rising around them, their lit offices revealing glimpses of other lives, other stories playing out in glass boxes suspended above the city. "I have money," she said suddenly. "Not much, but I can pay you back. Once the baby comes and I can work again." "Maya." Her name on his lips stopped her rambling. "When I said I wasn't offering charity, I meant it. This isn't about money." "Then what is it about?" He cracked eggs into a heated pan, the sizzle filling the silence between them. "Sometimes the universe puts people in our path for a reason. Sometimes helping someone else is the only way to help yourself." The cryptic response only deepened her confusion, but exhaustion was beginning to override her wariness. The warmth of the apartment, the smell of food cooking, the simple fact that she was sitting instead of walking, it all felt like a dream she was afraid to trust. "I should warn you," she said, watching him work. "I come with complications." Daniel's hands stilled for just a fraction of a second before resuming their task. "Don't we all?" Something in his tone suggested he meant it literally. Maya studied his profile as he cooked. noting the way his eyes occasionally flicked toward the windows, scanning the cityscape with the alertness of someone who expected trouble. Who was this man who lived in a fortress of glass and steel, who rescued pregnant strangers from alleys and spoke about the universe as if he'd made peace with its cruelties? "The baby's father," she began, then stopped. How could she explain Marcus without sounding like a victim, without revealing how thoroughly she'd been broken before fleeing Chicago? "Isn't in the picture," Daniel said gently, sliding a plate of perfectly scrambled eggs toward her. "I gathered that much." She picked up the fork with trembling fingers, the simple act of holding warm food nearly bringing tears to her eyes. "He's not a good man. Then you made the right choice leaving." Maya took a bite, and the taste of real food after weeks of near starvation made her close her eyes in gratitude. When she opened them, Daniel was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, protective, almost fierce. "Whatever brought you here," he said quietly, "whatever you're running from, it ends now." The morning light filtered through the hospital blinds as Elena stirred awake, her hand instinctively moving to her rounded belly. The events of the previous night felt like fragments of a fever dream. The alley, the rain, the stranger with kind eyes who'd appeared when she thought she might die alone on the cold pavement. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The same man from last night entered, carrying a steaming cup of coffee and what appeared to be fresh clothes draped over his arm. In daylight, she could see him more clearly. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps early 30s, with dark hair that looked expensive, despite its deliberately casual styling. His clothes were simple, but she noticed the quality, the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted wealth. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked, setting the coffee on the bedside table. The concern in his voice seemed genuine, which only deepened Elena's confusion about his motives. "Better," she replied cautiously. "The doctor said the baby is fine. Thank you for—" "You don't need to thank me." He pulled up a chair beside her bed. "I brought you some clothes. I guessed at the size." Elena studied his face, searching for any hint of ulterior motive. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against his knee. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be alone when you need someone most." Something in his tone suggested layers of meaning she couldn't quite grasp. "What's your name? Your real name?" "Marcus," he said simply. "Marcus Stone." The name meant nothing to Elena, but she noticed the slight hesitation before his surname. Another lie, she suspected, but she was hardly in a position to demand complete honesty from the man who'd likely saved her life. "Elena Martinez," she offered in return. "Elena." He tested the name, and she felt an unexpected warmth at the way it sounded in his voice. "The doctor wants to keep you for observation until tomorrow. After that," he paused, "I'd like to help you get back on your feet, properly." Elena's defenses rose instinctively. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity. Think of it as—" Marcus searched for the right words. "A temporary arrangement. I have a property, quiet, safe. You could stay there until after the baby comes. No strings attached." "Men always say no strings attached," Elena said bitterly, "right before they tell you what the strings are." Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "I'm not like other men you've known." Something in his eyes made her believe him, despite every instinct screaming at her to be careful. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Before Marcus could answer, Elena's phone buzzed on the nightstand. The number on the screen made her blood run cold. With shaking hands, she declined the call, but not before Marcus noticed her reaction. "Who was that?" he asked gently. "No one," Elena said quickly, but her face had gone pale. The phone buzzed again. Same number. This time, Elena turned it off completely. Marcus watched her carefully. "Elena, are you in some kind of trouble?" She laughed humorlessly. "What gave it away? The fact that you found me dying in an alley, or the fact that I'm 8 months pregnant with nowhere to go?" "That's not what I meant." His voice carried a gravity that made her look at him sharply. "Is someone looking for you? Someone who might hurt you?" The directness of the question caught Elena off guard. For a moment she considered telling him everything. About David, about the threats, about the real reason she'd been living on the streets rather than going to the police. But old habits of self-preservation held her tongue. "I can take care of myself," she said instead. "I'm sure you can. But you shouldn't have to." Marcus stood, pulling a business card from his wallet. "This has my number. Think about my offer. The property I mentioned, it's secure. Private. If you're running from something or someone, it would be harder to find you there than anywhere else." Elena took the card, noting that it bore only a phone number, no name or business. "You're very mysterious for a good Samaritan." A shadow of something, regret, fear, crossed Marcus's features. "We all have our secrets, Elena. The question is whether we let them destroy us or whether we find people we can trust with them." After he left, Elena stared at the card for a long time. Outside her window, Chicago sprawled endlessly, 8 million people living their lives, but she had never felt more alone, except for the stranger who'd appeared in her darkest moment like some guardian angel with secrets of his own. Her phone buzzed again despite being turned off, a message notification that made her stomach clench with familiar dread. Some phones, she'd learned, could never truly be silenced. The message was brief: "We know where you are." The sound of shattering glass jolted Elena from her restless sleep. Her eyes flew open in the darkness, heart hammering against her ribs as she struggled to orient herself in the unfamiliar room. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back. The alley, the rain, Marcus finding her. Another crash echoed from somewhere below, followed by muffled voices. Elena slipped from the bed, her bare feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. The baby shifted restlessly in her womb, as if sensing her fear. She pressed her hand to her belly, trying to calm both herself and the child within as she crept toward the window. The penthouse was high enough that the street below looked like a miniature world, but she could make out dark figures moving around the building's entrance. Too many figures for comfort. Her breath fogged the glass as she leaned closer, straining to see. "Get away from the window." Marcus's voice, low and urgent, made her spin around. He stood in the doorway, no longer the casually dressed man who had brought her soup hours earlier. Now he wore all black, and something metallic glinted in his hand. "What's happening?" she whispered, but he was already moving toward her, his hand finding the small of her back as he guided her away from the window. "People who shouldn't know where I am have found me." His jaw was tight, eyes scanning the room with military precision. "We need to leave, now." "I don't understand. Who are these people? What do they want?" Elena's hands shook as she pulled on the jacket, her mind reeling. "Marcus, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." He moved to a section of the wall that looked identical to every other section, pressing his palm against it. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage. "But I won't let anything happen to you or your baby. I promise you that." The sound of splintering wood echoed from the main living area. Marcus cursed under his breath, his hand finding Elena's elbow. "This leads to the parking garage," he said, ushering her into the passage. "There's a car waiting. Can you run?" Elena thought of the baby, of her swollen ankles and the exhaustion that had been her constant companion for weeks. But the terror in Marcus's eyes, terror not for himself, she realized, but for her, gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. "Yes," she said. The passage was cramped and dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows on the walls. Their footsteps echoed despite their attempts at stealth, and Elena found herself holding her breath with each step. Behind them, she could hear voices growing louder, more urgent. "Who are you?" she whispered, as they descended what felt like endless flights of stairs. "Really?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "That's a longer conversation than we have time for right now." He paused at a door marked with the number P2, listening intently before turning the handle. "The short version? I'm someone a lot of very dangerous people want dead. And now they want me dead too?" The look he gave her over his shoulder was answer enough. The parking garage was dimly lit and filled with shadows between the concrete pillars. Marcus led her quickly between rows of expensive cars to a nondescript black sedan that seemed almost invisible in the darkness. The engine was already running. "Get in," he ordered, but his tone was gentle despite the urgency. "Stay low." As Elena slipped into the passenger seat, she caught sight of movement in her peripheral vision. Men in dark clothing emerging from the stairwell they had just exited, their movements coordinated and predatory. Marcus slammed the car into gear and they shot forward, tires squealing against concrete. Elena pressed back against the seat, one hand braced against the dashboard, the other protectively covering her belly. "Hold on," Marcus said grimly. The garage exit loomed ahead, but Elena could see more figures positioned there, blocking their path. Marcus didn't slow down. Instead, he reached across her to open the glove compartment, revealing a small device with a red button. "Close your eyes," he commanded. She barely had time to comply before he pressed the button. Even through her closed eyelids, the flash was blinding. Shouts of confusion erupted from the men ahead, and Marcus gunned the engine, threading the needle between them as they stumbled, temporarily blinded. Then they were out, speeding into the empty streets of the early morning, leaving chaos and questions in their wake. The morning light filtered through the penthouse windows as Marcus found himself standing in the kitchen, watching Elena sleep on the couch. Her dark hair spilled across the cream-colored cushions, and for the first time since he'd found her, she looked peaceful. The tension had finally left her face, replacing the haunted expression that had carved itself into his memory. He turned back to the coffee machine, its quiet hum the only sound in the vast space. 3 days had passed since he'd brought her here, and already his carefully constructed world felt different. The silence that had once been his sanctuary now seemed hollow without her presence filling it. His phone buzzed against the marble countertop. A text from his assistant, board meeting, moved to 2 p.m. Investors getting restless about the Singapore deal. Marcus deleted the message without responding. The Singapore acquisition that had consumed months of his life suddenly felt like someone else's problem. He couldn't remember the last time he'd ignored business for this long, but every time he considered leaving the penthouse, something held him back. "You're up early." Elena's voice, still thick with sleep, made him turn around. She was sitting up now, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. The oversized sweater he'd given her made her look smaller, more fragile, but there was something different in her eyes today. Less fear, more curious. The morning light filtered through the penthouse windows as Maya stirred awake, her hand instinctively moving to her growing belly. For a moment she forgot where she was. The silk sheets, the view of the city sprawling below, the scent of expensive cologne lingering on the pillow beside her. Then reality crashed back. She was in Alex's home, safe but utterly dependent on a man whose last name she didn't even know. The space beside her was empty but still warm. She could hear movement in the kitchen, the soft clink of dishes, and the whisper of bare feet on marble. Rolling carefully to her side, she watched Alex through the open doorway as he moved with surprising grace for such a large man, preparing what looked like breakfast for 2. He'd changed since bringing her here 3 days ago. Gone was the careful politeness, replaced by something more genuine but infinitely more dangerous to her heart. The way he'd held her hair back when morning sickness struck, his gentle hands checking her temperature, the protective way he positioned himself between her and the windows. It all spoke of a man accustomed to taking care of what mattered to him. But she wasn't naive enough to believe she truly mattered to him. Not yet. "You're awake," his voice carried from the kitchen, warm with what sounded like relief. "How are you feeling?" He appeared in the doorway, wearing only sleep pants that hung low on his hips. Maya's breath caught. She'd seen him shirtless before when he'd tended to her, but in the morning light she could see details that had escaped her notice. Scars crisscrossed his torso, some surgical, others that looked like knife wounds. One particularly nasty mark ran from his left shoulder to just above his heart. "What happened to you?" The question escaped before she could stop it. His expression shuttered immediately. "Old business. Nothing for you to worry about." But Maya had lived on the streets long enough to recognize the aftermath of violence when she saw it. Those weren't accident scars. They were battle wounds. Were you in the military? Something like that. He turned back toward the kitchen, clearly ending the conversation, but not before she caught the tension that suddenly radiated from his shoulders. She followed him, wrapping the silk robe he'd given her more tightly around herself. The kitchen was a study in controlled luxury, all clean lines and expensive appliances that looked like they belonged in a restaurant. Alex moved through it with the efficiency of someone who spent a lot of time alone. "You don't have to take care of me," she said quietly, settling onto one of the bar stools. "I mean, I'm grateful, but I don't want to be a burden." He paused in his movements, his hands stilling on the coffee maker. "Is that what you think you are?" "I think I'm a pregnant woman with no money, no family, and no prospects who you found bleeding on the street. That's pretty much the definition of a burden." When he turned to face her, his eyes held an intensity that made her stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "Maya, I've spent the last 15 years of my life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Money, influence, connections. Everyone had an angle. You're the first person in longer than I can remember who asks for nothing." "That's not true. I asked for help." "No," he said, moving closer. "You asked for nothing. I'm the one who insisted on helping." The admission hung between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to address. Maya found herself studying his face, noting the way his jaw tensed when he was holding something back, the small scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the careful way he kept distance between them, even as his eyes said he wanted to eliminate it entirely. "Alex," she began, then stopped as his phone buzzed insistently on the counter. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor changed. The relaxed intimacy of moments before vanished, replaced by something cold and sharp that reminded her he wasn't just some good Samaritan with a nice apartment. "I have to take this," he said, already moving toward his study. "Don't answer the door. Don't go near the windows. If anyone calls the house phone, let it go to voicemail." Fear spiked through her. "Alex, what's wrong?" He paused at the threshold, his back to her. "Probably nothing. Just promise me you'll stay inside until I get back." "Get back? Where are you going?" But he was already disappearing into his study, the door closing with a soft but definitive click. Maya heard his voice, low and urgent, speaking in rapid-fire sentences she couldn't make out. The safe house Marcus had chosen sat nestled in the Hollywood Hills, its modern glass and steel facade offering panoramic views of the city below, while maintaining complete privacy behind electronic gates and sophisticated security systems. Elena stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, her hand unconsciously resting on her growing belly. 3 weeks had passed since the warehouse incident, and the silence felt more ominous than any direct threat. Marcus's security team had found no trace of their attackers, no digital footprints, no leads. It was as if they had simply vanished into the night, leaving behind only questions and the constant weight of waiting for the other shoe to drop. "You're thinking too loud," Marcus said, approaching with 2 cups of herbal tea. He'd been working from the house, conducting his billion-dollar empire through encrypted video calls and carefully orchestrated meetings with his most trusted advisors. To the outside world, he was simply taking a brief sabbatical to handle personal matters. Elena accepted the warm cup gratefully, inhaling the soothing chamomile scent. "I keep wondering if we're living in a dream or a nightmare. This house, the protection, you..." She gestured at the luxury surrounding them. "It doesn't feel real." "The danger is real enough," Marcus replied, his jaw tightening as he remembered the cold efficiency of their attackers. "But so is this." He moved closer, his presence both comforting and electric. Over the past weeks, their relationship had deepened beyond the initial rescue. They'd shared late-night conversations about everything from childhood dreams to business philosophies, finding unexpected common ground despite their vastly different backgrounds. Dr. Sarah Chen had become a regular visitor, monitoring Elena's pregnancy with discreet professionalism. Today's appointment had gone well, the baby was healthy and developing normally despite the recent stress. But even the doctor's visits were carefully orchestrated. with security sweeps and predetermined routes that spoke to the elaborate precautions now governing their lives. "Marcus," Elena said softly, turning to face him, "I need to know what we're really dealing with. These people who attacked us, they knew exactly who you were. This isn't random." He set down his tea and moved to his laptop, where multiple screens showed feeds from the security cameras surrounding the property. "I've been investigating that myself. David's been helping me trace some irregularities in my past business dealings. Transactions I don't remember authorizing, meetings that happened when I was supposedly elsewhere." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that suggests someone has been using my identity, my resources, for purposes I never approved." Marcus's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Offshore accounts, shell companies, investments in businesses I've never heard of. Someone has been playing puppet master with my life, and I'm starting to understand why they want me gone." Before Elena could respond, Marcus's secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from David. He answered immediately, putting it on speaker. "We have a problem." David's voice was tight with urgency. "I've been monitoring chatter in certain unofficial channels. There's been a significant payment made today. 7 figures transferred to an account traced to a known facilitator of permanent solutions." Elena didn't need the euphemism explained. She sank into the nearby armchair, her hand protectively covering her belly. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, already moving toward the weapons safe hidden behind a false panel. "Unknown. Could be hours, could be days. But they're escalating. My contact suggests this isn't a simple elimination contract. They want something from you first. Information, access codes, something that dies with you." Marcus pulled out a tactical vest and checked his sidearm with practiced efficiency. "Then we move tonight. Execute Protocol 7. "Marcus, no." Elena stood shakily. "We agreed you wouldn't do anything without—" "Protocol 7 isn't offensive action," he assured her, though his expression remained grim. "It's complete extraction. We disappear entirely, new identities, new location, everything." David's voice crackled through the phone. "The plane is fueled and ready at Burbank. Clean documentation will be waiting. But Marcus, once you activate this protocol, there's no going back. Your public identity, your company, everything you've built means nothing if Elena and the baby are dead." Marcus cut him off. "How long to implement?" Elena watched Marcus transform before her eyes, the caring man she'd grown to love becoming something harder, more dangerous. This was the side of him that had built an empire from nothing, that had survived whatever shadowy conspiracy had been using his name and resources. "What about your employees, your board of directors?" she asked. "David has contingencies in place. The company will survive without me, at least temporarily." Marcus moved to her side, his hands gentle despite the steel in his voice. "But you won't survive if we stay. These people have been patient, methodical. That patience is apparently at an end." As if summoned by his words, the house's security system began a low, insistent chiming. Someone was approaching the outer perimeter. The coffee shop on Fifth Avenue buzzed with the usual morning crowd, but Marcus barely noticed the chaos around him. He sat in the corner booth, hood pulled low, watching steam curl from his untouched cup. 3 days had passed since Elena's revelation about the threatening note, and sleep had become a stranger. His phone vibrated against the wooden table. Victor's name flashed on the screen. The handwriting analysis came back. Victor's voice was grim. "Professional-grade paper, untraceable ink. Whoever wrote this knows what they're doing." Marcus's jaw tightened. Security footage from the building? Clean. They knew exactly where the cameras were positioned. A pause. "Marcus, there's something else. I've been monitoring chatter in certain circles. Your name hasn't come up directly, but there's been increased activity around Blackwood Industries. Someone's asking questions." The coffee turned bitter in Marcus's mouth. He'd spent years building walls around his identity, creating layers of protection that should have been impenetrable. Yet somehow, someone had found a crack. double the security detail on Elena," he said quietly, "and I want you to dig deeper into her background. Maybe this isn't about me at all. Already on it. But Marcus," Victor's voice carried a warning, "if they've connected you to her, hiding won't be enough anymore." After ending the call, Marcus made his way back to the penthouse, through a maze of back streets and service entrances. The paranoia that had kept him alive in his early years was flooding back, every shadow a potential threat, every stranger a possible enemy. Elena was in the kitchen when he arrived, her pregnancy glow more pronounced now at 5 months. She moved with careful grace, one hand supporting her lower back as she reached for a glass. The sight of her vulnerability hit him like a physical blow. "You're back early," she said, turning to face him. Her smile faltered when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" He wanted to lie, to protect her from the growing storm, but the intelligence in her eyes told him she'd see through any deception. "We need to talk." "The note wasn't random," Marcus began. "Someone knows about us, about this place. They're watching." Elena's hand moved instinctively to her belly. Watching for what? This was the moment he'd been dreading. The truth sat heavy between them, waiting to be acknowledged. "I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am." Her eyes searched his face. "I know you're not just Marcus Reed." The admission hung in the air. He studied her expression, seeing not surprise but a weary kind of understanding. "How long have you known?" "Pieces started coming together a few weeks ago. The penthouse, the way you carry yourself, the fact that you never seem to actually go to work." She shifted, wincing slightly. "I found some mail addressed to M. Blackwood in the study." Marcus felt the last of his carefully constructed walls crumbling. "You're not afraid?" "I'm terrified," she corrected. "But not of you. Of what this means for my baby." Her voice caught on the last words. "For us." The admission of an us sent something warm and dangerous through his chest. He reached for her hand, relief flooding through him when she didn't pull away. "I won't let anything happen to you or the baby. But we need to be smart about this. Whoever's threatening us, they're not amateurs." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing circles over his knuckles. "There's something I need to tell you too." Marcus's stomach clenched. "What?" "The baby's father, David, he wasn't just some businessman who abandoned me." She took a shaky breath. "He worked for a security firm that had contracts with several major corporations. Before he disappeared, he was paranoid, scared. He kept saying he'd learned something he shouldn't have, something about his clients." Ice formed in Marcus's veins. "What kind of something?" "He never told me specifics, but he mentioned Blackwood Industries more than once. Said there were deals happening, money moving in ways that didn't make sense." Her eyes met his. "2 days after he told me he was going to expose it all, he vanished." The pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. The timing, the professional nature of the threats, Elena's abandonment, none of it was coincidence. "They didn't just find us," Marcus said slowly. "They led us to each other." Elena's face paled. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. You're abandoned exactly where I'd find you. Someone who knows my routines, my habits. They wanted us together. But why?" Outside, storm clouds gathered over the city, casting long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The fortress he'd built was about to be tested. The morning light filtered through the safe-house windows as Elena traced patterns on her growing belly, feeling the gentle flutter of movement within. 3 weeks had passed since the warehouse incident, and the baby seemed to respond to the increased calm with more frequent kicks and rolls. She'd grown accustomed to the routine of their temporary sanctuary, Adrian leaving before dawn for his mysterious business dealings, returning each evening with updates she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. The sound of multiple car engines approaching made her freeze. Adrian wasn't due back for hours, and Marcus had left explicit instructions never to answer the door when alone. She moved carefully to the reinforced window, peering through the bulletproof glass at the convoy of black SUVs pulling into the circular drive. Her blood ran cold. These weren't Adrian's vehicles. Elena grabbed the emergency phone Marcus had given her, her fingers trembling as she dialed the programmed number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried Adrian's line with the same result. The baby kicked hard against her ribs as if sensing her panic. Heavy footsteps echoed on the front porch. Professional, measured. Then came the sound she'd been dreading, the subtle click of lockpicks working against the reinforced door. Marcus had warned her that if someone really wanted to get in, they eventually would. She moved as quietly as her pregnant form allowed toward the back of the house, following the escape route Marcus had drilled into her memory. Through the kitchen, past the pantry, to the hidden panel that led to the underground tunnel. Her heart hammered as she heard the front door finally give way. "Sweep every room," a cold voice commanded. "She's here somewhere." The tunnel was cramped and dark, forcing Elena to move in an awkward crouch that put strain on her back and legs. The baby protested with sharp kicks, and she whispered soft apologies while navigating by the dim emergency lighting Adrian had installed. The tunnel stretched for what felt like miles but was probably only a few hundred yards, emerging in the basement of an abandoned farmhouse on the neighboring property. She emerged gasping, her dress torn and dirt-stained, just as her phone finally buzzed with an incoming call. "Elena?" Adrian's voice was sharp with panic. "Are you safe?" Marcus detected a breach at the safe house. "I'm in the tunnel exit point," she whispered, scanning the empty farmhouse basement. "There are at least 6 of them. Professional. Stay exactly where you are. I'm 20 minutes out." But Elena heard something that made her blood freeze, the distant sound of dogs barking, tracking dogs. They'd found the tunnel entrance. "They have dogs, Adrian. I have to move." "No, wait for—" She ended the call and climbed the farmhouse stairs, her body protesting every movement. Through the grimy windows, she could see the safe house in the distance, swarming with figures in tactical gear. She needed to reach the road, flag down help, anything to get away before they tracked her here. The baby kicked frantically as she pushed through the farmhouse's back door into the autumn afternoon. The woods stretched ahead, offering cover but also unknown dangers for a woman in her condition. Behind her, the barking grew louder. Elena had made it perhaps 50 yards into the tree line when she heard the farmhouse door slam open. Shouts echoed through the forest as her pursuers spread out in a coordinated search pattern. She pressed deeper into the woods, branches catching at her clothes and hair, her breathing becoming labored. A sharp pain shot through her lower back, different from the usual pregnancy discomfort. She paused, gripping a tree trunk as the pain intensified. Not now, she thought desperately. Not here. The sound of approaching footsteps forced her to keep moving despite the escalating pain. Through the trees ahead, she glimpsed a ribbon of black asphalt, a back road that might offer salvation. But as she stumbled toward it, another contraction gripped her, this one strong enough to double her over. The baby was coming. She managed to reach the road just as a familiar black sedan rounded the curve, driving fast. Adrian's car. He spotted her immediately, tires screaming as he braked and threw the vehicle into a sharp turn. Marcus was already out of the passenger seat before the car fully stopped, his weapon drawn and scanning the tree line. "Hospital!" Elena gasped as Adrian reached her. "Now!" Adrian's face went white as he saw the blood on her dress, understood what was happening. He lifted her carefully into the back seat, just as shouts erupted from the woods behind them. Marcus laid down covering fire as Adrian floored the accelerator, racing toward the city and the private medical facility where their child would either be born free or become the ultimate leverage against them. The chase was no longer just about secrets or revenge. It was about the future growing inside Elena, fighting to survive in a world that wanted it destroyed before it could draw its first breath. The first sign of trouble came at 3 in the morning when Elena felt wetness between her legs. She'd been restless all night, unable to find a comfortable position despite the luxurious mattress that Marcus had insisted was orthopedically perfect for expectant mothers. Now, sitting up in the moonlit bedroom, she touched the dampness and her heart lurched. "Blood. Marcus," she whispered, then louder when he didn't respond immediately. Marcus! He was beside her in seconds, fully alert despite having been deep in sleep. The past weeks of hypervigilance had trained his body to wake at the slightest irregularity. What's wrong? Something's happening. I'm bleeding. Marcus didn't waste time with reassurances or questions. He scooped her into his arms, grabbing his phone with one hand while supporting her with the other. I'm calling Dr. Chen. We're going to the hospital. But your security protocols... Fuck the protocols. The vehemence in his voice surprised them both. You and the baby come first, always. The drive to the private medical facility felt endless despite Marcus's aggressive navigation through empty streets. Elena gripped his hand, fighting waves of panic as cramps began radiating through her abdomen. At 28 weeks, the baby was viable but vulnerable. Every minute mattered. Dr. Chen met them at the emergency entrance, her usually calm demeanor betraying hints of concern. How much bleeding? Any contractions? Moderate bleeding, cramping started in the car. Elena managed as they transferred her to a wheelchair. The examination room became a blur of activity. Monitors, IV lines, urgent consultations between medical staff. Marcus paced like a caged predator until Dr. Chen placed a firm hand on his shoulder. She's stable for now. Partial placental abruption, but not severe. We're giving her medication to stop the contractions and monitoring both heartbeats closely. Marcus felt his knees nearly buckle with relief, but Dr. Chen's expression remained grave. She needs complete bed rest. No stress, no physical activity. Any excitement could trigger full separation, which would be catastrophic for both mother and child. Done, whatever she needs. Dr. Chen studied him carefully. Marcus, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding Elena's medical history. The gaps in her records, the lack of prenatal care early in pregnancy. It's highly unusual for someone to have so little documentation. Marcus felt ice form in his veins. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that people don't typically disappear from medical systems without reason. And when they resurface during medical emergencies, it sometimes attracts attention from parties who might have been looking for them. The implication hit him like a physical blow. In bringing Elena here, in creating a medical record under her real name for insurance purposes, had he inadvertently sent up a flare to whoever might be hunting her? Doctor, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Has anyone contacted you or this facility asking about Elena or her treatment? Dr. Chen hesitated, and that pause told Marcus everything he needed to know. A private investigator called yesterday, said he was trying to locate Elena Morrison on behalf of family members concerned about her welfare. I told him patient confidentiality prevented me from confirming or denying anyone's presence here. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. What exactly did you tell him? Nothing. But Marcus, if someone is determined to find her, and they have resources... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Through the observation window, Marcus could see Elena connected to monitors, her face pale but peaceful as medication helped her body relax. The sight of her vulnerability, combined with the knowledge that his decisions might have led danger directly to her, created a rage so pure it took his breath away. I need to make some calls, he said quietly. Marcus. Dr. Chen's voice carried warning. Whatever situation you're both involved in, Elena cannot be moved. Not for days, possibly weeks. Her condition is too precarious. Then we make our stand here. Within an hour, Marcus had transformed the medical facility into something resembling a fortress. Private security positioned at every entrance. Electronic surveillance monitoring all communications. His legal team working to seal Elena's medical records under attorney-client privilege. But as dawn broke over the city, Marcus received the call he'd been dreading. Mr. Kane? The voice was polite, professional. My name is Detective Rodriguez. I'm investigating the disappearance of Elena Morrison. We have reason to believe you might have information relevant to our case. Marcus stepped into the hallway, keeping his voice low. "I'm afraid I don't know anyone by that name, Detective." "Sir, with respect, we have evidence suggesting otherwise. Security footage, financial records, witnesses who can place Ms. Morrison in your company. We just want to ask a few questions to help ensure her safety. And if I decline to answer these questions—" The pause was telling. "Then we might need to have a more formal conversation downtown, though I imagine that would be difficult given your current location at the medical facility." They knew exactly where he was, which meant they knew exactly where Elena was. The game had found them. The monitors in Marcus's hidden control room flickered with incoming data streams, each one painting a darker picture than the last. Elena sat beside him, her hand resting protectively over her growing belly as they watched their carefully constructed world begin to unravel. "Blackwater Security has teams positioned at 3 locations," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "They're not just watching anymore, they're preparing to move." Elena studied the satellite feeds showing unmarked vehicles stationed near the safe house, the medical clinic, and disturbingly, the apartment building where she used to live. "They know about all of it, every place that matters to us." "Victor's been thorough," Marcus admitted, pulling up financial records that showed a web of offshore accounts and shell companies. "He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. The pregnancy, finding you, it was all the catalyst he needed." The weight of that revelation settled between them. Elena's rescue hadn't been the beginning of their troubles. It had been the excuse Victor needed to execute a plan that had been brewing in the shadows of the Steel Empire. Thomas burst through the reinforced door, his usually composed demeanor cracked with urgency. "Sir, we have a problem. Dr. Morrison never made it home last night." Elena's blood ran cold. "Sarah? But she left the clinic hours ago." "Her car was found abandoned 6 blocks from her apartment. No signs of struggle, no witnesses." Thomas handed Marcus a tablet displaying security footage. "But this came through on her personal phone 20 minutes ago." The screen showed Dr. Morrison in what appeared to be a stark white room, her hands bound but her expression defiant. She looked directly into the camera as a distorted voice spoke over the feed. "Mr. Steele has something that belongs to us. The woman and the child she carries represent a liability that must be contained. You have 24 hours to deliver them to the coordinates we'll provide, or Dr. Morrison will discover just how expendable she really is." Elena shot to her feet, fury overriding fear. "They took her because of us. Sarah has nothing to do with this corporate war of yours." "Which is exactly why Victor chose her," Marcus said grimly, already pulling up building schematics and traffic patterns on his computer. "He knows we won't sacrifice an innocent life, so what do? We can't just hand ourselves over, but we can't let them hurt her either." Thomas stepped forward, his military background evident in his tactical assessment. "The coordinates they'll send, it'll be a trap with multiple exit strategies for them and none for us, but they're expecting compliance, not resistance." Marcus was already 3 steps ahead, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards as he accessed resources Elena was only beginning to understand he possessed. "Victor thinks he's cornered us, but he's made a critical error. He's shown his hand too early." "What do you mean?" "Kidnapping Dr. Morrison was a federal crime. Corporate maneuvering is one thing, but this crosses lines that even Victor's connections can't protect him from." Marcus pulled up a secure communication channel. "I'm activating assets I hoped I'd never have to use." Elena watched as her mysterious benefactor transformed before her eyes. This wasn't the gentle man who had found her on the streets or the protective figure who had built her a sanctuary. This was someone with access to resources that operated in shadows deeper than corporate boardrooms. "Marcus, who are you really?" He paused, meeting her eyes with an expression that held years of carefully guarded secrets. "Someone who learned a long time ago that having money means nothing if you don't have the power to protect what matters. My father built an empire, but he also built the infrastructure to defend it against threats that don't respect legal boundaries." The implications of his words sent a chill through Elena. She was realizing that the man who had saved her wasn't just wealthy, he was connected to networks that operated beyond conventional law enforcement. "The baby," she said suddenly, the pieces clicking together. "Victor isn't just after control of your company, he's after your heir." Marcus nodded grimly. An heir he can't control or influence, a child that represents a future where his plans become irrelevant. He turned back to his computers, data streams flowing across multiple screens. "But he's underestimated what I'm willing to do to protect that future." Thomas was coordinating with unseen teams through an encrypted headset, his voice carrying the crisp efficiency of someone accustomed to high-stakes operations. "Strike teams are moving into position. We'll have Dr. Morrison's location within the hour." Elena felt the baby move, a small flutter that reminded her of what they were truly fighting for. "And after we get Sarah back? This doesn't end with Victor. There will be others who see us as threats." Marcus stood, his transformation complete. Gone was any pretense of the simple billionaire hiding his identity. "Then we make sure that threatening my family becomes the last mistake anyone ever makes." The war for their future was about to begin, and Elena realized they weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the right to exist without fear. The warehouse felt different in the pre-dawn darkness. Elena moved carefully between the shadows, her hand instinctively protective over her growing belly as she made her way to the hidden communications room Marcus had shown her. 3 days had passed since their confrontation about his identity, and the silence between them had grown suffocating. She'd memorized his routine by now. He left every morning at 5:30, returning only after she'd already retreated to her room. The careful distance he maintained felt like punishment, though she couldn't determine who was being punished, her for discovering his secret or him for letting his guard down. The blue glow of multiple monitors cast eerie shadows as she settled into the chair. She'd watched him operate the system enough times to navigate the basic functions. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard before she began typing, searching for any mention of Adrian Blackwood's recent activities. The results made her blood run cold. News articles cascaded across the screen, merger announcements, hostile takeovers, the systematic destruction of smaller companies. But it was the pattern that terrified her. Every business acquisition seemed connected to properties in this district, forming a web around their exact location. "You shouldn't be in here." Elena spun around, heart hammering. Marcus stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the monitor's glow. He looked exhausted, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. "I needed to understand," she said, not moving from the chair. "I needed to know what we're really facing." He stepped closer, and she saw something broken in his eyes. "What you're facing? This was never supposed to involve you this deeply. Too late for that." She gestured at the screens. "He's buying everything around us, isn't he? This whole area will be demolished within 6 months, if he gets his way." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "The warehouse, the surrounding blocks, everything. He's calling it urban renewal." Elena felt the baby shift inside her, a small flutter that somehow strengthened her resolve. "There's something else, something you're not telling me." The silence stretched between them until Marcus finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "The night I found you, it wasn't coincidence." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "Adrian's people had been watching you, following you." He moved to another terminal, fingers flying over the keys until surveillance footage appeared. "This is from that night." Elena watched herself stumbling through the rain, but now she could see what she'd missed. The black sedan trailing her at a distance, the figures in dark clothing who seemed to be herding her toward the exact spot where Marcus had found her. "They wanted you visible, vulnerable. They knew I'd—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "They knew you'd what?" "That I'd help you. It's who I am, Elena, who I've always been, even before." He gestured vaguely at his surroundings. "Adrian knows my weaknesses better than anyone." The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. "I'm bait. You were supposed to be, but something changed." He turned to face her fully. You were supposed to lead them to me, confirm my location. Instead, you became something they didn't plan for, which is someone I'd protect with my life." The words hung in the air between them, charged with an intensity that made Elena's pulse race. But before she could respond, every screen in the room flashed red. Through the security feeds, Elena watched black vehicles surround the warehouse. Men in tactical gear poured out, moving with military precision. At the center of it all, a figure she recognized from news photos stepped out of a pristine sedan. Adrian Blackwood had come personally. "The safe room," Marcus said, grabbing her hand. "Now." But Elena pulled back. "Running won't solve this. It'll never end, will it? He'll keep coming. Elena, please." She stood, decision crystallizing. "I won't spend the rest of my life hiding. My child won't grow up in shadows because of a war that started before I was born." Marcus stared at her, something like admiration mixing with terror in his expression. "You don't understand what you're saying. Adrian doesn't negotiate, he destroys. Then maybe it's time someone destroyed him first." The lights in the warehouse flickered as power tools began cutting through the reinforced doors. Time was running out. "There's another way out," Marcus said finally. "But it means trusting me completely. No questions, no hesitation." Elena looked at the screens showing Adrian's forces closing in, then at the man who'd saved her life and turned it upside down. The baby kicked as if sensing the moment's importance. "I trust you," she said. Marcus nodded once, then moved to a wall panel she'd never noticed. His hand pressed against what looked like solid concrete, and a section slid away to reveal a narrow tunnel. "This leads to the subway system." From there, the main door exploded inward. "Move," Marcus whispered, pushing her toward the tunnel. But as Elena stepped into the darkness, she knew running was only postponing the inevitable. This war would end only when one brother destroyed the other, and she was no longer willing to be just a casualty in their battle. The safe house felt like a tomb carved from steel and silence. Maya pressed her palm against the bulletproof glass, watching Marcus pace the fortified living room like a caged predator. 3 days had passed since the attack at the penthouse, and the weight of their captivity was crushing them both. "The forensics came back," Marcus said, ending his call with Detective Hayes. His face was granite, but Maya caught the tremor in his hands as he set down the phone. "The men who attacked us weren't freelancers. They were former military, enhanced with experimental stimulants. Someone invested serious money into making them nearly unstoppable." Maya's blood chilled. She'd seen the aftermath, the way those men had moved with inhuman speed and precision, how it took multiple shots to bring just one down. Experimental stimulants? Who has access to that kind of technology? That's what terrifies me. Marcus finally stopped pacing, his eyes meeting hers across the room. "The list is very short, and everyone on it has ties to my father's old research projects." The baby kicked sharply against Maya's ribs, as if sensing her spike of fear. She rubbed the spot absently, trying to process the implications. "What kind of research? And you knew about this?" "Not until after he died." Marcus's laugh was bitter. "I found his private files when I was settling the estate. Project Prometheus, they called it. Hundreds of test subjects, most of them recruited from homeless populations where no one would miss them if something went wrong. The core team was maybe a dozen people, scientists, military liaisons, government oversight. But here's the thing that's keeping me awake at night." Marcus moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the reinforced glass. 3 of them have died in the past 2 years. Car accidents, heart attacks, a supposed suicide. All very clean, very convenient. Someone's cleaning house. And now they know I exist. More importantly, they know I have access to everything my father left behind. Marcus turned back to her, and Maya saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes, genuine fear. "The files I inherited aren't just evidence of past crimes, they're blueprints, formulas, prototype designs that could revolutionize warfare if they fell into the wrong hands." The secure phone rang, cutting through the tension like a blade. Marcus answered it immediately, his face growing paler with each word from the other end. Understood. Yes, we'll be ready. He hung up and immediately began moving toward the bedroom. Pack light. We're leaving in 10 minutes. What happened? They found us. Marcus was already pulling clothes from the closet, his movements sharp and efficient. Hayes says someone's been asking questions about safe house locations, offering serious money for information about recent high-priority relocations. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. How is that possible? You said this place was... Nothing's impenetrable if you have enough resources and motivation. Marcus grabbed a tactical bag from the closet, revealing an arsenal that made Maya's breath catch. Guns, ammunition, what looked like military-grade communication equipment. And whoever's hunting us has both. As Maya hastily gathered her few belongings, a terrible thought occurred to her. Marcus, what if this isn't about your father's research? What if it's about the baby? He froze, a loaded magazine halfway to his weapon. What do you mean? Think about it. The timing, the resources they're throwing at this. What if your father's experiments weren't just about enhancing existing soldiers? What if he was working on something generational, something that could be passed down? The color drained from Marcus's face completely. That's impossible. You were already pregnant when I found you. The baby can't be... Can't be what? Connected to his research somehow? Maya's voice was rising despite her efforts to stay calm. You said they recruited from homeless populations. What if someone selected me specifically? What if none of this is coincidence? Before Marcus could respond, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in hellish red light. In the distance, they could hear the subtle whine of vehicles approaching. Marcus grabbed Maya's hand, his grip iron strong. Whatever the truth is, we figure it out later. Right now, we run. The sound of the first explosion shattered the night, and Maya realized their fortress had become their trap. The safe house felt like a trap now, every shadow holding potential danger. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her hands protectively curved around her growing belly, watching Marcus pace the length of the small room like a caged predator. 3 days had passed since Victor's men had found them at the apartment, and the walls seemed to close in with each passing hour. We can't stay here much longer, Marcus said, his voice tight with frustration. He stopped at the window, careful to stay behind the heavy curtains as he peered out at the empty street below. Victor's reach extends further than I anticipated. Elena studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers unconsciously flexed as if reaching for a weapon. Tell me about him. About what really happened between you two. Marcus turned from the window, his dark eyes meeting hers. For a moment, she thought he might deflect again, but something in her expression seemed to break through his walls. Viktor Kozlov was my father's business partner, he began, settling into the chair across from her. When I was 12, my parents died in what everyone believed was a car accident. Viktor became my guardian, the executor of their estate, my mentor. He taught me everything about running the company, about being ruthless when necessary. Elena watched emotions flicker across his face, pain, anger, something that looked like betrayal. I worshipped him, Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. He was the closest thing to family I had left. Until I discovered the truth on my 21st birthday. What truth? That he killed them. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. My parents had discovered Victor was embezzling millions from their joint ventures, laundering money through shell companies. They were going to expose him, so he arranged their accident. Elena's breath caught. How did you find out? My father kept a safety deposit box I never knew about. The bank contacted me when I reached majority age. Inside were documents, recorded conversations, proof of everything. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. Victor had been stealing from my family's legacy for years, using me as the perfect cover, the grieving orphan heir who trusted his beloved guardian completely. The pieces began falling into place for Elena. So you started planning your revenge. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Daughter? Natasha. Beautiful, intelligent, seemingly innocent. I thought she was different from her father, that she didn't know about his crimes. I was wrong. His laugh was bitter. She was his greatest weapon. Everything between us was orchestrated. Every meeting, every kiss, every whispered promise of love. What happened? I proposed. That night I told her everything, about the evidence I'd gathered, about my plans to bring Victor to justice. I thought she would stand with me. Marcus stopped pacing, his back to Elena. Instead, she drugged me and called her father. I woke up in a warehouse, tied to a chair, while Victor explained how they'd been playing me from the beginning. Elena's heart ached for the betrayal he must have felt. How did you escape? I had contingencies in place. My security team found me before Victor could finish what he started, but not before he made it clear that he would never stop hunting me. I had taken too much from him, learned too many of his secrets. The only way this ends is with one of us dead. And now he's after me too, Elena said quietly. Because I'm a weakness he can exploit. Marcus turned to face her, his expression fierce. You're not a weakness. You're everything worth fighting for. He crossed to her, kneeling beside the bed and taking her hands in his. But I won't let him hurt you or our child. I promise you that. Before Elena could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. What is it? Message from Victor. Marcus's voice was deadly calm. He has someone I thought was safe. Elena watched the blood drain from his face as he read further. Who? Sarah Chen, my head of security. She's been like a sister to me since my parents died. He showed Elena the photo, a bound woman in what looked like an abandoned building. He wants to trade her for me, midnight tonight at the old pier district. It's obviously a trap. Of course it is. Marcus was already moving, gathering weapons from hidden compartments around the room. But I can't leave her to die because of my war with him. Elena struggled to her feet, panic rising in her chest. You can't go. That's exactly what he wants. Marcus paused, looking at her with eyes full of regret and determination. I know, but some battles you have to fight, even when you know the odds. He was going to leave her. She could see it in his face. The safe house felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus stood at the reinforced window, watching shadows move between the trees that shouldn't have been there. His security team had swept the perimeter twice, but something felt wrong. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. They know where we are. Sophia's voice cut through the silence behind him. She sat on the edge of the bed, one hand protectively curved over her growing belly, the other clutching the encrypted phone that had been buzzing with increasingly urgent messages. Marcus turned from the window, his jaw tight. How long do we have? Victoria's team intercepted communications 20 minutes ago. They're moving assets into position now. She looked up at him, fear and determination warring in her eyes. There's something else. The leak wasn't random, Marcus. Someone on your board has been feeding information to whoever's hunting us. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made his blood run cold. Who? We don't know yet, but Victoria thinks she can flush them out. Sophia stood carefully, her movements deliberate. She wants to use me as bait. Absolutely not. The words came out sharper than he intended. Marcus crossed to her in 3 quick strides, his hands finding her shoulders. I won't risk you or the baby. We're already at risk, she said quietly. Running isn't working anymore. They found us here, they'll find us anywhere. At least this way we control the situation. Before Marcus could respond, his phone erupted with alerts. Emergency notifications flooded the screen. Security breaches, movement detected, all happening simultaneously. This wasn't a simple assault, it was a coordinated attack designed to overwhelm their defenses. Move, now. He grabbed the go-bag they'd kept packed, pulling Sophia toward the hidden passage Victoria had shown them during their arrival briefing. The reinforced steel door was concealed behind what appeared to be a solid wall, accessible only through biometric scanning. As the door slid open, revealing a narrow corridor lined with emergency lighting. Explosions echoed from multiple directions. The attackers weren't trying to capture them quietly anymore. They were bringing the entire structure down. They ran through the underground tunnel, Sophia's breathing growing labored as they navigated the twisting passage. Emergency lighting flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that seemed to chase them deeper into the earth. Behind them, the sound of systematic destruction grew louder. There, Marcus pointed to a junction ahead where the tunnel split into 3 directions. Left leads to the vehicle depot, right goes to the communication center, straight continues to the secondary exit. "Where's Victoria?" Sophia gasped, pausing to catch her breath. As if summoned by her words, Victoria's voice crackled through the tunnel's communication system. "Marcus, can you hear me? They've breached the main facility, but I've got visual on your position. Take the right tunnel. I'm in the comm center with evidence that will end this." Marcus hesitated. The plan had been to evacuate immediately if they were discovered, but Victoria's discovery could be the key to stopping their pursuers permanently. What kind of evidence? Financial records, communication logs, everything we need to expose who's been orchestrating this hunt. But they know I have it now. If we don't transmit this data in the next few minutes, it dies with me. Sophia grabbed Marcus's arm. "We have to help her. It's too dangerous. You're not just responsible for yourself anymore. And what kind of world am I bringing this child into if we don't stop this now?" Her voice carried a strength that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. "Victoria risked everything to help us. We can't abandon her." Another explosion, closer this time, decided for them. The left tunnel, their escape route, filled with smoke and debris. Their only options now were forward or right, toward Victoria. They took the right tunnel, moving as quickly as Sophia's condition allowed. The communication center lay behind blast doors that were already sealed when they arrived. Through the reinforced glass, they could see Victoria working frantically at multiple computer terminals, data streaming across screens faster than the human eye could follow. Marcus placed his palm on the biometric scanner, and the doors began their slow opening sequence. That's when they heard the footsteps echoing from the tunnel behind them, heavy, measured, professional. Their pursuers had found the passage. "Victoria!" Marcus called as they slipped through the barely opened doors. "How much more time do you need?" 2 minutes for the upload, but they're jamming our satellite connection." She didn't look up from her work, fingers flying across keyboards with desperate precision. "I need someone to get to the roof and manually align the dish." The footsteps were getting closer. Marcus looked at Sophia, then at the ladder leading to the surface access hatch. 2 minutes felt like an eternity, but it might be their only chance to end this nightmare permanently. The choice was simple: run and remain hunted forever, or make a stand and fight for the future they'd been trying to build together. The warehouse exploded in chaos as Marcus's men stormed through the entrance, automatic weapons blazing. Adrian threw himself over Elena, shielding her body as concrete chunks rained down from the bullet-riddled walls. The deafening roar of gunfire mixed with shouts and screams, creating a symphony of violence that seemed to stretch on forever. "This way!" Adrian grabbed Elena's hand, pulling her toward a narrow corridor that led deeper into the building. Behind them, Reeves barked orders to his remaining men, his voice barely audible above the carnage. Elena stumbled, her pregnant belly making movement difficult, but Adrian's strong grip kept her upright. They burst through a service door into what appeared to be an abandoned office space, fluorescent lights flickering overhead like dying stars. "The stairs," Adrian gasped, pointing to an emergency exit sign. "We need to get to the roof." But before they could move, footsteps echoed in the stairwell above them. They were trapped between Marcus's assault team and Reeves's men. Adrian's mind raced, calculating their options. There had to be another way out. Elena pressed against the wall, one hand protectively cradling her belly. "Adrian, the baby—" "I know." He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes fierce with determination. "Nothing is going to happen to either of you, I promise." The sound of approaching boots grew louder from both directions. Adrian scanned the room desperately until his gaze landed on a large window facing the adjacent building. It was a 10-foot gap across an alley, dangerous but possible. "Can you trust me?" he asked Elena. She nodded without hesitation, and something profound passed between them in that moment. Despite everything, the lies, the danger, the impossible circumstances, their connection remained unshakable. Adrian smashed the window with a chair, clearing away the jagged glass. The fire escape on the neighboring building looked sturdy enough, but the jump would require perfect timing. He helped Elena onto the window ledge just as the stairwell door burst open. There, Reeves appeared with 2 armed men, his face twisted with rage. "Kill him, but the woman lives. She's worth nothing to us dead." Adrian didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around Elena and leaped. For a terrifying moment, they were suspended in mid-air above the dark alley. Elena's scream caught in her throat as they sailed across the gap, Adrian's powerful frame propelling them forward. They crashed onto the fire escape with bone-jarring force, the metal structure groaning under their weight. Bullets pinged off the iron railings as Reeves's men opened fire from the warehouse window. Adrian pulled Elena down the fire escape stairs, taking them 3 at a time while she clung to the railing. Her breathing was labored, but she kept pace, driven by pure adrenaline. Almost there, Adrian encouraged, as they reached the bottom platform. The ladder to the alley floor was still 12 feet up, too high for Elena to safely drop in her condition. More gunfire erupted from the warehouse as Marcus's team gained ground. Adrian could hear Reeves shouting orders, coordinating a search of the surrounding buildings. They had minutes, maybe less. "I'll lower you down," Adrian said, gripping Elena's wrists. She trusted him completely, allowing him to suspend her over the edge before dropping into his arms in the alley below. They ran through a maze of narrow streets, Elena's condition slowing their pace but her determination keeping her moving. Adrian's phone buzzed. "Marcus, status report." His security chief's voice was tense. "We're clear of the warehouse, heading to extraction point Beta." Adrian changed direction, guiding Elena through a series of back alleys toward the waterfront. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, police responding to reports of gunfire. The chaos would provide cover, but it also meant more variables to navigate. "Adrian!" Elena's voice was strained. "I need to stop!" He immediately noticed the way she was holding her stomach, her face pale with pain. "What's wrong?" "Contractions. They started during the gunfight." She leaned against a brick wall, breathing heavily. The stress, the running, it's triggering early labor. Adrian's blood ran cold. They were still miles from safety, being hunted by armed killers, and now Elena was going into premature labor in a dark alley. The weight of everything he'd brought into her life crashed down on him. "How far apart?" he asked, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Maybe 10 minutes. But they're getting stronger." Adrian made a decision that went against every tactical instinct. Instead of pushing toward the marina, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Elena needed medical attention immediately, even if it meant exposing their location. "This is going to be okay," he told her, though uncertainty gnawed at his chest. "I'm going to get you to a hospital." Elena gripped his hand as another contraction hit. In the distance, the sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. Whether they belonged to Marcus, Reeves, or the authorities remained to be seen. The safe house felt like a tomb as Marcus paced the living room, his phone pressed against his ear. Elena watched from the couch, one hand protectively curved over her belly, the other clutching the ultrasound photo that had started this nightmare. Detective Rivera's voice crackled through the speaker, each word dropping like a stone into still water. "We found Dr. Harrison's body an hour ago," Rivera said, her tone grim. "Single gunshot to the head, execution style. His office was ransacked, but they missed something, a hidden drive with encrypted files. Our tech team is working on it now." Marcus stopped pacing. "How long before you can crack it?" "Could be hours, could be days. But Marcus, there's something else. We intercepted communications suggesting they're planning to move tonight. Whatever they're after, they're getting desperate. Elena's blood turned to ice. She'd seen that desperation in Victor's eyes at the hospital, had felt it in the way he'd cornered her in that sterile hallway. The baby kicked, as if sensing her fear, and she pressed her hand firmer against her stomach. "We need to relocate," Marcus said, already moving toward the bedroom to pack. "This place is compromised." "Wait," Rivera's voice stopped him mid-stride. "We might have a better option. What if, instead of running, we make them come to us? On our terms." Elena stood slowly, her heart hammering. "You want to use us as bait, not us," Marcus said firmly, his protective instincts flaring. "Me. They want me, not you." "They want the baby," Elena corrected, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "And as long as I'm carrying this child, we're a package deal." Rivera cleared her throat. "There's an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Multiple exits, good sight lines, and my team can position themselves strategically. If we can draw them out—" "Absolutely not," Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade. "I won't put Elena and the baby at risk." Elena moved to him, placing her hand on his arm. The muscle beneath her palm was coiled tight with tension. "Marcus, look at me." He turned, and she saw the war raging in his dark eyes, love battling with fear, protection warring with desperation. "We can't keep running forever," she said softly. "This baby deserves a life without looking over its shoulder, without guards and safe houses and false identities. Elena, listen to me." Her voice grew stronger, more resolute. "I've been powerless my whole life. Powerless when my parents died, powerless when I ended up on the streets, powerless when men like Victor thought they could control me. But this—" She gestured between them, then placed both hands on her belly. "This is my choice, our choice." Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the sharp line of her cheekbones. "I can't lose you. Either of you. You won't." The certainty in her voice surprised even her. "Because we're going to end this. Tonight." Rivera's voice interrupted the moment. "There's something else. The encrypted files. Our tech found a partial decode. Marcus, they have documents dating back to your father's death. Whatever secret they're protecting, it goes deeper than just your identity." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd suspected, had nightmares about it for years, but hearing the confirmation made his knees weak. Elena caught his arm, steadying him. "How deep?" he asked, though part of him didn't want to know. "We're still piecing it together, but it looks like your father discovered something about Blackwood Industries, something worth killing for." Elena watched the color drain from Marcus's face. She'd seen him face down armed men without flinching, had watched him make million-dollar decisions with ice-cold calculation. But this revelation cracked something open in him, exposed a wound that had never properly healed. "They killed him," Marcus whispered. "They killed my father to protect their secret, and now they want to kill my child for the same reason." The fury that rose in his voice was volcanic, years of suppressed grief and rage finally finding its target. Elena had never seen him like this, dangerous and desperate and absolutely lethal. "Then we give them what they want," she said quietly. "We draw them out and we end this." Rivera's voice came through the phone again. "We'll need 2 hours to set up. Can you hold tight until then?" Marcus looked at Elena, searching her face for any sign of doubt. Instead, he found the same steel determination that had first drawn him to her. The strength that had kept her alive on the streets, that had made her fight for her child when everyone else had abandoned her. 2 hours, he confirmed. As he ended the call, Elena moved into his arms. The baby kicked between them, a reminder of what they were fighting for. Outside, darkness was falling, and with it would come their enemies. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Elena felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. The safe house felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Elena pressed her hand against her swollen belly, feeling the baby's restless movements mirror her own anxiety. 3 days had passed since Marcus disappeared into the night with nothing but a promise that he would end this nightmare once and for all. She moved to the reinforced window, peering through the bulletproof glass at the empty street below. 2 of Marcus's most trusted security personnel maintained their posts, but their presence offered little comfort. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every sound made her heart race. The encrypted phone Marcus had left buzzed against the coffee table. Elena lunged for it, hoping for news, but the message that appeared made her blood run cold. "Your billionaire can't hide forever. Neither can you." 5. Across the city, Marcus stood in the abandoned warehouse where this all began, where Victoria first revealed the depth of her obsession and the length she would go to possess what she believed was rightfully hers. The building reeked of rust and decay, fitting for what would be their final confrontation. "You came alone," Victoria's voice echoed from the shadows above. She emerged on the catwalk, flanked by 2 armed men. Even in the dim lighting, Marcus could see the unhinged gleam in her eyes. "How romantic of you." "It ends tonight, Victoria." Marcus kept his hands visible, though he felt the weight of the concealed weapon against his ribs. "No more games, no more innocent people getting hurt." Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. "Innocent? That little street rat you've been playing house with? She trapped you with that pregnancy, just like dozens of others have tried. I'm saving you from yourself. Elena never knew who I was when I found her. She loved me when she thought I was nobody." "Love?" Victoria's voice cracked. "I loved you first. I built half your empire with you. We were supposed to rule together, but you threw it all away for what? A charity case and her bastard child." Marcus took a careful step forward. "What we had was business, Victoria. It was never love. You know that. You were my partner, my friend, but you wanted something I couldn't give you." Marcus felt his phone vibrate, the signal from his security team that they were in position. He just needed to keep Victoria talking a little longer. "Elena sees me, Victoria. Not my money, not my influence, just me. That's something you never understood." And what happens when she learns the truth? When she discovers that her knight in shining armor is really Marcus Thorne, the man whose ruthless business practices have destroyed countless lives? Will she still love you then? The question hit closer to home than Marcus wanted to admit. It was the fear that kept him awake at night, the doubt that gnawed at him every time Elena looked at him with trust and affection. Would she still want him when she knew about the hostile takeovers, the lives disrupted by his pursuit of profit? Victoria's expression shifted from rage to something resembling pity. "You really believe that fairy tale, don't you? You think love conquers all? I think it's worth fighting for. Then fight for it." Victoria nodded to her men. The warehouse erupted in chaos. Marcus dove behind a concrete pillar as gunfire exploded around him. Glass from the high windows rained down as his security team breached the building from multiple entry points. Shouts and running footsteps echoed through the cavernous space. Marcus drew his weapon and returned fire, using the maze of machinery and storage containers for cover. Through the mayhem, he caught glimpses of Victoria retreating toward the back of the building, her face a mask of fury and desperation. A bullet sparked off the metal beam inches from his head. Marcus rolled to new cover, his heart pounding as he thought of Elena waiting for him, trusting him to come home safe. The baby would be born soon, and Marcus had promised to be there, to be the father and partner they both deserved. One of Victoria's men appeared around a corner, weapon raised. Marcus fired twice, center mass, and the man dropped. The sound of approaching sirens wailed in the distance, his insurance policy finally arriving. "Victoria!" Marcus called out. "It's over! Surrender now and nobody else has to die." Her laughter echoed from somewhere in the darkness ahead, wild and unhinged. "If I can't have you, Marcus, nobody can." The explosion lit up the night sky 3 blocks away. The morning sun cast long shadows across the private airfield as Elena watched the last of Victor's men load boxes of evidence into the federal agents' vehicles. 3 weeks had passed since the warehouse confrontation, and the world had shifted on its axis. The Kozlov Empire was crumbling, its tentacles severed one by one as prosecutors built their cases. Alexander stood beside her, his hand resting protectively on her lower back as their daughter, now 2 months old and perfectly healthy, slept peacefully in her carrier. The man who had once hidden behind the identity of a simple cafe owner now wore his true name openly, though the weight of his fortune felt lighter somehow. "It's over," he said quietly, watching the last vehicle disappear down the runway. Elena turned to study his profile. The tension that had carved deep lines around his eyes was finally beginning to ease. "Is it? Really?" He looked down at her. Understanding her question wasn't just about Victor or the conspiracy. It was about them, about what came next when the immediate danger had passed and they were left to navigate the reality of their unlikely partnership. "The threats are gone," he said carefully. "Victor will spend the rest of his life in prison. The board members who conspired with him have been arrested. My position at Sterling Industries is secure." "That's not what I meant." A private jet taxied toward them, its engines creating a wall of sound that temporarily suspended their conversation. Elena had learned to read the silences between them, the way Alexander retreated into himself when faced with questions that couldn't be solved with money or strategy. When the noise subsided, he turned to face her fully. "What happens now is up to you." The words hung between them like a challenge. Over the past months, she had transformed from a desperate woman with nowhere to turn into someone who could stand toe-to-toe with federal agents and corporate lawyers. The pregnancy that had once made her vulnerable had become a source of strength, grounding her in purpose, even as everything else shifted around her. "I've been offered a position," she said. "The FBI wants me to consult on cases involving corporate corruption. Apparently, my experience gives me unique insights." Something flickered across Alexander's features, pride mixed with what might have been concern. "That's dangerous work. So is loving a billionaire with enemies." The admission surprised them both. Elena had meant it as a joke, a way to deflate the tension, but the words carried more truth than either was prepared to acknowledge. Love had crept up on them slowly, disguised as partnership and survival, until it became impossible to ignore. Elena. Her name on his lips was both question and prayer. "I know what you're going to say," she interrupted. "That your world is complicated, that there will always be risks, that I deserve something simpler. Don't you?" She laughed, the sound carrying across the empty airfield. "Simple? Alexander, I was abandoned pregnant on the street, nearly killed by Russian criminals, and gave birth while hiding from assassins. Simple was never an option." The baby stirred in her carrier, making soft sounds that drew both their attention. Alexander's expression softened as he looked down at the tiny girl who had never known a world without his protection. "She's not even yours biologically," Elena said gently, "but you look at her like she hung the stars. She might as well have." His voice was rough with emotion. "Both of you saved me from becoming someone I never wanted to be." Elena reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight roughness of his morning stubble. "Then stop trying to save me from you." The kiss that followed was different from the desperate, stolen moments they had shared during the crisis. This was a choice made in daylight, with full knowledge of the complications and challenges ahead. When they broke apart, Elena could see her own decision reflected in his eyes. "The FBI position is based in New York," she said. "Convenient, since that's where Sterling Industries is headquartered." "Very convenient." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Though I should warn you, my apartment has terrible security. Just last year, someone walked right off the street and completely took over my life. Sounds like you need better screening procedures. I'm thinking of hiring a consultant, someone with experience in hostile takeovers." The baby chose that moment to wake fully, her cries cutting through their banter and reminding them of the very real responsibilities that came with their choices. As Elena lifted their daughter from the carrier, she felt the weight of the future settling around them, not as a burden, but as a foundation. Alexander's arms came around them both, creating a circle of warmth against the morning chill. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The fortress he had built to protect them had become something neither had expected, A home,